Shalom, my friends. As I've told you before, I struggle with these Torah portions because they're so extraordinarily rich and packed with secrets and depth and beauty. And while I know that it's true for each portion of the Torah, for every word of the Torah, and really for every letter of the Torah, these stories are the foundation stories of the Jewish people and of monotheism, and really the foundation stories for all of mankind. And so I wish I could have at least a month to swim through the rich waters of these portions, but we'll just have to make do with the time we're allotted. So while there's so many subjects I wanted to zoom into, on a deeper level I wanted to zoom out because of the unique point we are in Jewish history and the special role our families are playing in the unfolding of Jewish destiny out here on the Judean frontier. So to illustrate the point I want to make, I want to share a story that happened when I first came out to these mountains to live in 2016. I was living in this little cottage right here behind me. In Hebrew, it's called Tzimmer, that our partnership built together. Now, due to my life journey and the fact I was single and without a family, I was the only one that could move into this small one-room cottage suspended on a mountain nearly 2 kilometers away from my closest neighbor. So for the first few weeks of the winter, I didn't even have electricity. Now, most of the settlements in Judea and Samaria have some sort of security fence surrounding them for the obvious reason to protect them from terrorist infiltration. But since we came out here, we've almost always been living on the wire, and we had to decide what we're going to do with our very limited resources. Were we going to build fences and security systems, or were we going to plant trees and build? And so we unanimously agreed that it's one thing to take the Jew out of the ghetto, it's another thing to take the ghetto out of the Jew. And we were going to plant trees, and we were going to build, and we were going to put our faith not in flimsy fences and closed-circuit cameras, but in the God of Israel where it belongs. And plus, when you build walls and fences, you may be keeping others out, but you're also keeping yourself in. And so when we moved out here, we opened up these breathtaking, beautiful, and holy mountains, not only to Jews in the surrounding villages, most of which have never been out here, but to Jews throughout the world, Jews throughout Israel, and really nations all around the world. We opened this place up to the world. Before we came out here, that settlement was the southeastern tip of Judea, and we have expanded it to what it was in biblical times, to the land that God gave us. Now, additionally, after serving in the Israeli army and living in the Middle East for nearly 17 years, I knew that a single guy with a crazy dog and a gun isn't exactly the most enticing target for terrorists. And so, when it came down to it, I simply didn't feel fear. The first 5 years I was out here, I felt no fear at all. I haven't felt fear since I've been here. I didn't even put these bars on my windows until I was engaged and I had to be a little bit more cautious. But when I moved in, all the partners sat down to discuss security. And my partner Yossi said it's important that the Arabs in the area think that I'm crazy. That them thinking I'm nuts would be a valuable deterrent. So after living here for only a few weeks, I walked out onto my balcony right here, and I looked out. This house wasn't here, and I saw 3 Arab shepherds with all their sheep right in front of my house. Now, as you can imagine, knowing me as you do, my initial impulse is to say, Sabach al-Khair, good morning, and let the sheep graze, even on our property, right in front of my house, because it's part of my nature of just welcoming guests. But I knew that unfortunately it's not that simple, that they could be doing reconnaissance to see what our weaknesses are, what our vulnerabilities are, and they would see such a thing as a sign of weakness. And within no time, our farm would be flooded with shepherds, and we simply don't know who's a shepherd and who's a terrorist there to harm us. And also, just as we don't take our sheep into the middle of their villages without being invited, they should afford us the same respect, because ultimately that's the real language in these parts. It's respect. We're not living in the Middle West. We're living here in the Middle East, and things are different here, and you have to understand who your neighbors are and what their values are. And so I stood on my mirpesset here on my balcony, and I saw these 3 Arab shepherds, and I screamed on the top of my lungs, and I waved for them to come to me, which means I go to Hebrew University. One day is an apple. One day is a pickle. You're a liar. And just totally crazy non sequiturs followed by a maniacal laugh for them to come towards me. Now, I have to admit, when I did that, I felt a little bit like King David when he was fleeing from Saul in the 21st chapter of the book of Samuel, and he went to the Philistines and he acted like a crazy person to make them think he wasn't the great warrior David who famously slew Goliath. So that's what I felt like. And so they looked at me like, whoa, this isn't exactly in jihadist playbook. Who is this lunatic? And so they sort of went back down. They turned and went the other way. They rerouted themselves in the other direction. But then they returned further down the valley closer to our vineyards. And when I was on the way there to figure out what to do, the spirit came over me that, wow, I'm dealing with the same Philistine shepherds that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov dealt with in the same mountains, in the same land, in the same place. This is how things are supposed to be right now. And I felt part of the same chain that we encounter in this Torah portion, with Isaac digging up the same wells that his father Abraham dug, which the Philistines spitefully stopped up. Isaac dug them up again and gave them the same names that his father did, carrying the Abrahamic torch forward from generation to generation. Just this morning, my wife Shana handed me this form to go and renew my gun license. My gun license. Do you know how many thousands of years Jews were helpless at the whim and mercy of nations that didn't know the first thing about mercy? And now we're back in our land, protected by the first Jewish army since the times of King David, living in a country in which I can have a gun to defend myself and my family. It feels like a modern manifestation of the ancient blessing. The words that Isaac said to Jacob when he went to receive his blessing dressed as Esau. Isaac felt his hairy arms and he felt Esau. And he heard his voice and he heard Jacob. And he said those prophetic words that have echoed throughout the generations. Hakol kol Yaakov v'hayadayim yedei Esav. The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Esau was a warrior. His blessing was descriptive. He would always be living by the sword, which was not only a description of his future, but of his life at the time. And now when you come to the land, when you come to the hills of Judea, you go into yeshivas, into places of learning, exuding the sweet music of Torah study, and you look in the doors and you see young scholars poring over the holy words of the Torah. When you speak with them, you get the sense of gentle kindness, of love. But they have the hands of Esau, weapons of war, M16 slung over their shoulders. Yet despite the hands of Esau, the voice of Jacob is stronger than ever within them. I remember during one of the last defensive wars in Gaza, when the daily barrage of missiles aimed at the Jewish kindergartens became simply too much to bear. There was an incursion into Gaza, and one of these young Torah scholars found himself in the house of a terrorist, which they took over, and they were waiting for further instructions. His rabbi told the story that he received a call from this young man from the home of the terrorist with a halachic question, a question of Jewish law. He said that his phone was losing battery and he wanted to know whether it was permitted to charge his phone in an outlet in this terrorist's home in Gaza, or whether that would be stealing. You understand, he wasn't concerned at the moment, he wasn't concerned for his life, but whether he would be violating God's law of theft, even from a terrorist enclave in Gaza. That, my friends, is the voice of Jacob, despite carrying weapons and fighting with the hands of Esau. We're back in our land, finally, after thousands of years of praying and suffering and yearning in the exile to finally come home. And now we are home, and we're redigging the wells of our forefathers in the land God promised us and promised them. As you know, I end every message with a blessing. And if there's any Torah portion which conveys the overwhelming power of blessings, it's this one, in which Isaac's blessing powerfully influences the entire course of world history. And so I want to bless all of you and bless all of us, that Hashem should continue guiding all of us in our own ways to authentically reconnect to our roots, to the Torah, to the Bible, to Him, and to each other. That God should continue bringing us back to the land of Israel. And even if we must pick up weapons and fight with the hands of Esau, that our deepest truth, our deepest voice, the voice of Jacob, continues to grow stronger and stronger, shining a light of love and healing to a fractured world, bringing the ultimate redemption for which we've been praying since the beginning of time. Amen. Shalom, my beloved friends. Back to you, Jeremy.
My name is Ari, and I live here on the edge of the Judean frontier. And just as the prophets foretold, the mountains of Judah are coming to life. The ingathering of the exiles is taking place right before our eyes. The dead language of Hebrew has been revived, and the final prophecy is manifesting before our eyes as the righteous of the nations are coming together with humble hearts. Here in the land of Israel Fellowship, we come together every single Sunday, live, in person, over Zoom, to connect to the secrets of the Hebrew language, the secrets of the Torah of the Bible, and connect with each other. Because in the end of the day, it's the friendships and the relationships that are bringing us together, because we have one thing in common: our fear and our love for the God of Israel. And now I'm inviting you to join us, along with hundreds of Jewish and Christian families from all around the world, to experience the beauty and the holiness and the magnificence of our fellowship. So click below and get the first 5 sessions for free, as well as joining us on our next session so you can taste the beauty and the holiness that is happening on this mountain.